Imagine walking through thick vines and hearing a metallic echo, only to discover a World War II plane the world forgot, but the pilot never left. The jungle had its own rhythm, a language of whispers and sharp interruptions. Cicadas droned like electric wires, parrots shrieked, and the canopy swayed with unseen movements. Yet when Jonas Hale pushed deeper into the trail, every sound seemed to vanish at once, like the forest was holding its breath. That silence was when he heard it, a hollow metallic echo, not a natural sound, not wood splitting, not branches groaning, something man-made, reverberating as though struck by a hidden bell. Jonas wasn't a professional explorer. He wasn't chasing a treasure map or leading a guided tour. He was a documentary editor, the kind of man who usually spent hours in a dark room adjusting sound levels on other people's discoveries. But in this forgotten corner of South Carava, he'd decided to hike alone, partly for the thrill, mostly to clear his head. He never expected the jungle to give him a story instead. The vines parted like curtains and he saw it. At first it resembled a massive boulder swallowed by moss, but as he circled the clearing, sunlight cut across a curve of steel, dulled with rust but unmistakably shaped. He wiped away a layer of dirt, and beneath his hand glinted the remains of paint. Faded insignia of wings spread wide. His pulse quickened. This wasn't a rock. It was a machine that had no business still existing here. The nose of the aircraft jutted from the earth at an awkward angle, propeller blades bent back like broken fingers. The fuselage was scarred but not shattered. The wings sloped into the soil, buried but strangely intact, as though the forest had decided to cradle it instead of consuming it. Trees had grown up around the wreck, roots entwining it, branches protecting it from storms. It was less a crash site than a shrine. Jonas stepped closer, brushing aside ferns, and felt his throat tighten. The cockpit canopy, cracked into spiderwebs, reflected slivers of light. Behind that fractured glass, a figure sat motionless. At first his brain insisted it had to be a mannequin, a relic planted here for dramatic effect, but the details betrayed that hope. The pilot wore a leather flight jacket, its surface darkened by rain and mildew. A headset still clung to his head, wires running down into nothing. His jawline was thin, skin tight as parchment, but his posture was upright, shoulders squared as though he'd never abandoned the mission. Jonas's breath caught. The man wasn't slumped. He wasn't curled in death. He was seated as though still waiting for clearance to take off. And the strangest part, his eyes weren't open in horror, nor closed in decay. They rested gently shut, like someone in deep, unshakable sleep. Jonas's hands trembled as he lifted his camera. The lens zoomed on the pilot's chest, and there it was. Tarnished aviator wings pinned just above a rusted nameplate. The letters were corroded but faintly visible. CRH. No first name, no rank, just initials, hanging like a whisper from 70 years ago. He whispered them aloud. CRH. The jungle did not respond. Or maybe it did in the faint rustle of leaves that sounded almost like an answer he couldn't translate. He crouched closer, noticing a box wedged between roots at the base of the cockpit. A metal case, edges dented, corners stained green. It looked military. Supply chest, ammunition, or maybe flight logs. Jonas reached out, half against his better judgment, fingertips grazing the surface. That's when it happened. The cockpit canopy shifted with a sharp pop, not a full opening, just enough for air to escape with a hiss. Jonas froze. His heart hammered. He stared at the pilot's face. For a second, a breath only, the chin tilted, ever so slightly as though acknowledging him. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping on a vine. His rational mind screamed that it was impossible. No body should remain upright for decades. Not like this. No hinge should still creak after so many years. And yet, everything about this scene refused to obey time. The insects hadn't returned. Not one bird sang. The silence pressed against his ears. Jonas turned his gaze upward, scanning the canopy. Branches arched overhead like cathedral beams, light slicing through in golden shards. The plane wasn't hidden. It was displayed, as though the forest wanted it found only now, not before. Jonas's breath slowed. He whispered to himself, "This isn't a crash site. This is a waiting room." The thought horrified him, because waiting implied purpose. Waiting implied the pilot had unfinished business, and Jonas had just stepped into its center. His eyes returned to the metal case. It hadn't been placed there by accident. The vines were woven around it, not through it, almost as though the jungle itself had been guarding the box until the right pair of hands arrived. Jonas swallowed hard. He wasn't just sitting there, he was waiting. Round as Jonas knelt in the shadow of the wreck, the canopy shifted again, a sliver wider. The pilot's jacket rippled though there was no breeze, and from deep within the cockpit came a faint, rhythmic tapping. 3 knocks, steady as a code. Jonas realized with a chill, someone or something was still inside, and it wanted his attention. Steady, tense, he filmed the wreck to prove it was real, but when the canopy shifted, the jungle gave him something else. A pilot who refused to be forgotten. Jonas didn't run. He wanted to. Every nerve screamed at him to tear through the vines and vanish back to the dirt trail. But fear had a strange twin, curiosity, and it pulled stronger. That tapping sound, 3 knocks from within the cockpit, repeated again, soft yet deliberate. It wasn't random. It was rhythm, as though someone or something inside was answering a question he hadn't asked. Jonas steadied his breath and lifted his camera again. The viewfinder zoomed on the cracked canopy. For a heartbeat he swore the pilot's lips moved, just slightly, as if forming words beneath decades of silence. He pressed record. The lens focused on the initials etched into the corroded nameplate. CRH. He whispered them again, and this time the knocks echoed once more. 3 beats, a pause, then 3 again. It was a pattern, a signal. The forest felt conspiratorial now, like every tree was leaning in to listen. Jonas circled the wreck carefully, shoes sinking in damp soil. Roots twisted like snakes over the fuselage, anchoring it in place. On the tail, the paint had nearly vanished, but faint outlines of numbers clung to the metal. 4-79. He scribbled it in his notebook with shaking hands. Serial numbers meant records. Records meant identity. And identity meant that the man inside the cockpit wasn't a ghost story. He was someone history had misplaced. At the base, the metal case gleamed faintly, edges dented but unbroken. Jonas brushed the vines aside. The lock was old, rusted, but intact. He tugged once. It refused. He tugged again. The tapping inside the cockpit grew louder. Jonas froze. The air thickened. Sweat clung to his brow. The pilot's head tilted again, fraction by fraction, eyes still closed but expression somehow aware. Jonas stepped back, heart racing. He wasn't imagining this. The forest wanted him here. The pilot wanted him here. Night came quickly in the jungle. Shadows smothered the clearing, and the wreck glowed faintly in moonlight like a monument. Jonas sat against a tree, unable to leave, unable to rest. He replayed his footage on the small screen of his camera. The video showed what his eyes couldn't capture. Tiny movements in the pilot's hands, a subtle tightening on the yoke, the flicker of a chest rising once as though in breath. Jonas muttered, "This isn't possible," but the footage didn't care what he believed. In the quiet, he studied the initials again. CRH. Who was this man? He imagined a pilot briefing 70 years ago, somewhere far from here. Young men gathered, maps spread across a table, hands tracing routes across enemy territory. He pictured laughter, nerves, a captain's steady voice giving orders, and then this one pilot, CRH, nodding, saluting, and walking toward a machine that would one day be swallowed whole by vines. Had the war ended for him, or had it simply paused, suspended in this clearing, unfinished, waiting for recognition? At dawn, Jonas made his decision. He would open the case. He couldn't leave the mystery half told. He pulled a multi-tool from his bag, wedged it into the rusted lock, and twisted. The metal screamed but gave way. The lid popped with a cough of stale air. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a stack of papers bound with twine. Jonas lifted them carefully. Flight logs, weather notes, coordinates, all scrawled in ink that bled but still spoke. And tucked among them a photograph. 4 young men in flight jackets, arms slung around each other, smiling despite the weight of the world behind their eyes. On the back, faint pencil marks. Squadron 9, keep us flying. Jonas's throat closed. The handwriting was strong, defiant, but the strangest detail wasn't in the letters. It was in the photograph itself. One of the men, standing slightly apart, wore a jacket with initials embroidered faintly, CRH. He looked exactly like the pilot in the cockpit. Jonas's camera caught something new. Through the canopy glass, the pilot's fingers twitched against the yoke. Once, twice, a slow, deliberate squeeze, and then came the tapping again. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 knocks. But this time there was a change, a final single knock, echoing like punctuation. Jonas whispered, "What do you want?" The jungle answered not with sound but with motion. A breeze pushed through the clearing, sudden and strong, lifting leaves in a spiral. For the first time since Jonas arrived, the pilot's jacket shifted visibly, sleeve rustling as though an invisible hand had brushed against it. Jonas staggered back, chest pounding. He clutched the photograph tighter, its edges cutting into his skin. The forest wasn't finished. This wasn't discovery, it was invitation. And as the morning light pierced the canopy, Jonas realized the jungle wasn't just keeping the plane. It was keeping a promise that whatever mission CRH had left unfinished, it wasn't over. Not yet. He thought the jungle was guarding a wreck, but it was guarding a mission, and the pilot hadn't stopped waiting. WWII waltz. Jonas didn't remember standing. One moment he was staring at the photograph, the next he was climbing the fuselage, hands scraping against bark and steel. His heart thundered. Every instinct said leave, but something deeper pulled him forward. He had uncovered enough pieces to feel the weight of expectation. The canopy glass loomed inches from his face. He wiped the dirt from its cracked surface, and for the first time he saw his reflection alongside the pilot's. 2 faces, one living, one preserved by silence, mirrored in fractured glass. Jonas whispered, "CRH, what are you waiting for?" The knocks answered. 3. Pause. 3. 1. The same rhythm that had stalked his dreams all night. Morse code, he realized with a jolt. Jonas pulled out his phone, fumbling to translate. 3. 3. 1. The pattern didn't match a word, but when reversed, 133, his eyes widened. It wasn't a word at all. It was a page number. He tore back to the metal case, riffling through the logbook. His hands shook as he flipped pages until he landed on 133. The ink was faded, but the words were sharp enough to burn. Mission incomplete. Target coordinates, 9° N, 61° W. Await orders. Keep flying. Jonas froze. Those numbers pointed deep into the jungle basin, miles from any settlement. Whatever Squadron 9 had been sent to find or protect, they hadn't finished it. And this pilot, CRH, hadn't left his post. The air changed again. Heat pressed down heavier. Jonas looked up and nearly stumbled. The pilot's head was tilted farther now, chin angled almost toward the logbook in Jonas's hand. The eyes were still closed, yet the message was clear. You found it. For the first time, Jonas didn't feel fear. He felt responsibility. He climbed again, pressing his palm against the canopy. "I'm not a soldier," he whispered, "but I'll carry it. I'll keep flying." Leaves rattled in unison, a sudden chorus. Roots shifted subtly, releasing pressure on the plane's wings. The wreck groaned, not in collapse but in recognition. The tapping echoed once more, steady, softer, almost approving. Jonas pressed harder, and then, impossibly, the canopy latch gave. The glass shifted open, dust cascading down like ash. A breath of air spilled from the cockpit, warm and metallic, carrying with it the scent of oil and earth. Jonas gagged, then steadied himself. Inside, the pilot hadn't decayed into bones as Jonas feared. His body was fragile, yes, but whole. The jacket clung to him, insignia dulled yet proud, and on his chest, beneath the wings, something gleamed, a chain with a small rusted key. Jonas reached. His hand hovered, uncertain. The jungle hushed again, and then he closed his fingers around it. The pilot's lips parted. No sound came, but Jonas swore he saw the shape of a single word. Keep. The key fit the lock of a second compartment in the case. Jonas twisted, and inside lay a sealed envelope, brittle with age. He unfolded it carefully. The paper nearly disintegrated in his hands, but the message remained. To the one who finds us. Our flight was never meant to return. What we guarded cannot be left behind. Carry it forward. Squadron 9. Jonas's throat tightened. He looked back at the pilot. The man's expression hadn't changed, but his posture seemed lighter, as if some invisible weight had shifted. Jonas whispered, "You waited 70 years for someone to listen." The jungle stirred again, vines swaying without wind. For the first time, Jonas understood. This forest hadn't buried the wreck. It had preserved it, guarded it, kept it intact until a witness could come. He packed the logs, the photo, the letter. He hesitated before touching the last item in the case, a small leather-bound notebook with a single word etched on the cover. Alive. He didn't open it. Not yet. Some pages were meant to remain unfinished until the right moment. As the sun broke through the canopy, Jonas stood beside the wreck one last time. The pilot remained upright, eyes closed, at peace. The jungle had released its secret, but not entirely. Jonas raised his camera and spoke softly, more to the silent figure than to himself. I'll keep it. Your mission, your story. I'll keep it alive. The lens captured his words. The forest seemed to exhale, and for the first time in 2 days, the cicadas resumed their song. Jinfatale, the jungle can hold a secret for 70 years. How long could it hold yours? Some missions end with silence. Others wait for someone willing to keep them.